Are you new to sewing with knit fabrics or want to start sewing with knit fabrics and don't know where to begin? I feel ya. It can be pretty intimidating and daunting to sew with knits and to even get started, even if you've had experience sewing with wovens before. You know, the techniques are very different for how wovens versus knits are sewn. And, you know, quite honestly, there are so many knit fabrics out there that it can even be intimidating to know which fabrics to buy. So today, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take you with me to Joann Fabric. We're gonna go through and we're gonna look at some tools that can help to make your sewing experience better. And then we're gonna come back and look at some different techniques that can help to, let's say, elevate your sewing experience. Okay, so I am here at my local Joann Fabric that is in the Phoenix area that is absolutely my favorite. So the great thing about Joann and stores like it is that you can go in and actually touch and feel the fabric, especially if you're not that familiar with it, and also just last minute go jump out and get some of the tools that you need. So let's go ahead and go in.
You know you're in Joann's when you get a wobbly, thread-filled wheel on your part.
First thing you should do is go head on over to the pins and needles, sewing tools, and sewing notions section. Hey guys, look at this aisle. That can be pretty intimidating at first, but have no fear. I'll show you exactly what you need to get. Okay, so these are the two different needle types that we're gonna go ahead and get. A Jersey 8012 ballpoint needle and a stretch needle that's a 9014. It's important to get ballpoint needles for our machine because we need those for knit fabric. It is not recommended to use regular universal needles on knit fabric. Let's keep going. Okay, next thing we're going to pick up is a sewing gauge. These are awesome, especially when pinning for your hems. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna grab is this Wash Away Wonder Tape. This tape is really, really great to use for hems to make sure that your fabric doesn't shift. You don't have to use any pins in it, and it also can help to stabilize the fabric to make sure that it doesn't stretch out as you sew. Next up is the aisle for rotary cutting and scissors. Now, there's a lot of stuff in here. A lot, okay, but we need to focus on the rotary cutter. So rotary cutters are really, really, really helpful when cutting knit fabric. So I think that my favorite one is, let's see, probably these ones, the titanium ones, 45 millimeter. I'm actually not going to buy this one today because I already have it, but the great thing about the 45 millimeter cutters is that you can actually buy from like your local hardware store or even on Amazon. I'll put some links for all these products on Amazon in the video description, but you can easily find very affordable blade replacements for this that come in bulk because you will need to change it pretty often. So I go ahead and put this one back and let me see where the rotary cutter, oh, here they are, blade refills are. So see, these are, let's see, 2 for $14.99 here at Joann's. That's a lot. Trust me, you can get a much better deal on replacement blades online. Okay, now it's thread time. My personal favorite threads are the Gutermann. I'll also place some Amazon links in the description for them, but let's go ahead and take a look at some of them. Okay, so I personally like the Sew All threads, and these Sew All threads are 100% polyester. I actually just saw, which I've never seen before, maybe I haven't paid attention, there's a top stitching one, which again, I've never seen, so I haven't used those, but those would be kind of interesting to try. But 100% polyester, I haven't had any issues with the snapping of threads, and so some people do like to put like a stretch thread in their bobbin. I don't think it's necessary. Just grab a couple of the Gutermann white and black to get started. And here we are, the knit fabric section. Joann's has actually gotten really good over the last couple of years with expanding their knit fabric selection. So let's go ahead and see what we got.
Okay, so the great thing about coming to a fabric store is that you actually get to touch and feel the fabrics. So I personally have never seen double brush polyester in a Joann's before, so this is really exciting, and you can see it says right on here, floral double brush polyester spandex. That is a great one to start out with, and you can go through and just feel the knit fabrics and then look at the labels so that you know exactly what it is you're feeling so that you can decide which one you think you might want to get started with. Now, what I would not recommend is starting with a rayon spandex. So is this a rayon? Oh, this is a Lysel spandex. I actually don't even know what that fiber is, but let's see right here, this is a rayon spandex, and you can feel it, and you can feel how slippery it is, and it's much, much thinner. This is not a heavyweight rayon spandex. Heavyweight rayon spandex, they're slippery. They're difficult. They have a very, very smooth touch to them. Okay, so in this section of Joann with the sewing machines, you can ask the staff there to get you a walking foot, and they'll get one specific for your brand or one that does work with your brand. There are also some much less expensive universal ones online, and I will also put that link in the description. Okay, so we're back from Joann and ready to get started, but let's first recap the things that we purchased. So first is going to be a walking foot. I'll give you a demonstration on how to use this and why it's so valuable. The second thing is a jersey ballpoint needle. This is an 80-12 needle size. The 80 refers to European size. The 12 refers to a US size, but typically referred to as just an 80-12 ballpoint needle. I also picked up a twin needle to use for a hem because it really makes a difference in the finished look. Some wash away wonder tape, which is really helpful to use to stabilize our hem to make sure that our knit fabric isn't stretching out. You can also use this in lieu of pins or clips, and so you have a much nicer finished product, and it washes away when you wash your garment. A sewing gauge, which is very helpful to make sure that your seam allowance is consistent all the way throughout your garment. And finally, a rotary cutter, which will change your life if you've never used one before. So let's go ahead and get started with a couple demonstrations. Okay, so a couple of things and a couple of tricks. The first thing that I would recommend is that you increase your stitch length when getting started with sewing with knits on a standard sewing machine. So over here is where my stitch length is currently showing. I do obviously have a computerized model. If you don't have a computerized model, that's fine. There should be a dial that may have a number range between, I don't know, let's see what it goes between. 0.2 to, I believe the maximum is a 5 that this goes up to, but let's check. Yeah, maximum is a 5. So you might see a dial there that gives you some options. I personally like my stitch length to be at 3.5. I feel like it's not too long of stitches, it's not too short, it's just really the perfect amount. So let me show you the difference between the different stitch lengths. Okay, so before I give you a demonstration on the stitch lengths, I want to talk about the knit fabric. So this is a jersey. It's the one that I would recommend you start to get familiar with knits because it does have kind of a, I don't want to say a rough finish because it's certainly not rough. It's actually very smooth, but it has a little bit more friction than some of the other choices like a rayon spandex or double brush polyester. Certainly do not think that you should start with any type of sweater knit, as that can take a little bit more skill to get that sewn correctly. But with knit fabric, there's a grain line and a direction of greatest stretch, which is perpendicular to the grain line. So if you take your fabric and you pull it apart, you can see the direction that those lines go in, that the fabric goes in. That is going to be your grain line. So in this image, your grain line is running up and down. The direction that I'm pulling it, which is perpendicular to the grain line, is called the direction of greatest stretch. And so you'll see on pattern pieces that it will actually have guidelines for you for the grain line and for the direction of greatest stretch. Usually patterns have both of those in it, but make sure that you're paying attention to the orientation of where your grain line is when you cut fabric out, because that will make a very big difference. Now, another comment that I often get get is that there's tunneling in somebody's top stitching. Well, the tunneling will happen if you are stitching in the direction of the grain line. So if you're stitching here and you have, let's see, a twin needle, and so you have parallel lines, they sometimes tunnel within each of these little divots. I don't even know if the divot's the right word, but in between each of the grain line, and can kind of create a tunneled look. So be aware of that.
Okay, so let's talk about how we install this wonderful walking foot. So basically what we want to do is we're going to install this, and we're going to put this little arm on the walking foot above this bar here, because every time the needle goes up and down, it's actually going to lift this walking foot up and down so that the fabric can more easily glide between the feed dogs and the actual walking foot. So the first thing that you want to do is you're going to want to unscrew right here, just slightly, your existing foot and the attachment that actually clamps to it. So you're going to remove that entire piece and put it to the side. Then you're going to want to unscrew this a little bit more, not so much that the screw comes out, but so that you can slide this part. There's a little hook on here to hook around this metal piece on the sewing machine. Let me move this thread out of the way. Okay, so first I need to make sure to lift this arm up so that it is above this bar. And then now you see that metal hook piece on the walking foot is around that sewing machine. I don't even know what that piece is called, shank perhaps. And I'm gonna go ahead and just tighten this screw. Oops, sorry, hit the camera. Tighten the screw, and once I get it tightened enough with my fingers, I'm going to get my screwdriver that came with my sewing machine and go ahead and tighten that up as much as possible. You definitely do not want to leave that screw loose at all, because your walking foot will wobble, and that is certainly not helpful. So now let me just check that it's all on right. Yep, it is on right, and we are good to go. So one of the things with knit fabrics that you need to make sure to do is have the appropriate stitch length. Now a 2.5 stitch length, let me show you the difference. So 2.5 is typically like the default setting. I personally like to use the 3.5, but I'll show you the difference between the 2.5, the 3.5, and the 4.5, okay? So this is going to be at 2.5. You see how the walking foot moves up and down? That's so that it doesn't stretch out your fabric. So that is really the biggest benefit to it. Now, some walking foots, really the quality is important in the walking foot that you purchase. The cheaper ones may not be as tight on your machine, and so that you can get not as good results on that. So make sure that you, so sorry for the wobbly guys, I keep hitting my camera. It's a little difficult to film at this angle. So now let's try the 3.5. And now let's try the 4.5. So typically your stitch lengths will vary anywhere from a 0.02 all the way up to a 5. Again, I find that my favorite is a 3.5 when working with knits. Okay, now let's look at these differences here. So the top one is a 2.5, the middle is a 3.5, and the bottom is a 4.5. So of course the benefit with increasing your stitch length is that
the needle doesn't go through the piece of fabric as many times, and so it doesn't bunch up as much. It doesn't get stretched as much, I guess is the right term. So make sure that you adjust and play with your stitch length to achieve whatever result that you would like. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about twin needles next. I have just installed a twin stretch needle is what it's called. I purchased a Schmetz twin universal needle, but I actually already had this twin stretch here in my craft room, and it is definitely preferable to use a stretch needle when possible and when available, because it is a ballpoint, and so it is much better for the knit fabric, and you'll get a much better finished result. So I went ahead and installed that, and I want to show you something. So first, let me go ahead and sew a line of top stitching with the double needle. Okay, so I get this complaint a lot that the needle, the twin needle, is tunneling. And this is actually a narrow needle, but a lot of complaints I get from people who don't know what to do because it's tunneling. Well, the reason in this case that it's tunneling is because I top stitched in the same direction as the grain line. You see that? So the grain line is actually running in this direction. And so the tunneling effect happens when the stitches straddle the grain line, and it creates that effect. In general, almost always, you're going to be top stitching against the grain, so in the direction of greatest stretch. And why is this? This is because when you have a garment, let me flip this around. When you have a garment, and let's say you're doing the hem, you're hemming on the bottom of the fabric, and this is wrapping around the body in this direction, right? So that it can stretch to fit your body. So the top stitching is normally done in the direction of greatest stretch. So let me show you the difference of what that looks like when I do it correctly against the grain line. Okay, in general, tunneling is not typically an issue with tension on a sewing machine. It's most often related to if you're sewing with or against the grain line. So do you see how that tunneling? Well, there is no tunneling. I guess there's a tiny bit, and that's simply because on the back of the fabric, because it is knit, that sometimes happens a little bit. But you can tell that it's nowhere near what it was when we went with the grain line. Hem tape. This stuff is amazing, this Wonder Tape, okay? So it comes in a roll like this. There's one sticky side, which is to the inside, and an outer plastic strip that basically allows you to manage it. So the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is turn your fabric wrong side up. It's right side down. And you're going to want to apply it to the edge of the fabric of whatever seam you're trying to sew, or in this case, I'm going to show you the difference between the hem that I did, the top stitching without the Wonder Tape and top stitching with the Wonder Tape. Okay, so go ahead and apply that, and then you want to gently remove the top plastic strip along your hem tape. I have my handy seam gauge, so I'm going to just pretend I'm doing a 1-inch hem here, and I'm going to fold this up. I'm going to measure 1 inch, oops, stuck to my finger there, and just press it in place. And just make sure that this is consistent. That looks good. So just go ahead and press it down, okay? So now I don't need to use any type of pins or anything. I don't personally find that this gunks up my needles at all. There's a little hiccup there in that, so let me fix it so it lays flat. There you go. And so now you can see that this creates stability here so that it's not stretching out. Now watch how beautiful this looks. Now look at this finished top stitching. Look at how flat it is. That stability really helped that finished look, and it's going to wash off when you throw this in the washing machine. So look at the difference between this one that I did initially without the hem tape and then this one with it. I keep saying hem tape. Wonder tape, wash away wonder tape. Now there are some versions that are not wash away, so make sure that you purchase the actual wash away ones. Now, next and finally, what we're going to talk about is fabric jamming when you first start your stitches. Okay, and the last thing that we're going to talk about is how to start your stitching to help to prevent your sewing machine from eating your knit fabric. That can happen with less stabler knits than jersey. This jersey probably won't have this happen. However, with some other thinner and stretchier fabrics, it absolutely could. So what you should do is actually not start right at the fabric edge, but start maybe like a 1/2 inch. Probably doesn't even need to be that far, but from the fabric edge. Also grab your top thread and your bottom bobbin thread. Grab that in your fingers, and you're going to just hold it and help to kind of gently feed the fabric through while holding these threads so that it doesn't, it's much less likely to jam. So once you start stitching, stitch once and then back stitch a couple of times as close to the fabric edge as you want it, and then just go forward. Just those couple of extra stitches or that extra distance from the edge of the fabric can really help to make sure that it's not eating your fabric. Other people have found great success with using tissue paper on the bottom of your fabric and to create additional stability, and then you can just remove the tissue paper after you're done. All right, guys, well, there you go. I hope these tips really helped with getting started with knit fabrics. If any questions, please post them in the comments. Again, I have links all in the description for some of these products if you want to order them from home. Also, stay tuned for some future videos, one of which is Know Your Knit Fabric. So we'll go through the different types of knit fabrics, the different acronyms, and really what to know when buying online. Have a great day, everyone.